Hi, I'm Dr. Harry Schick. I've been in practice for 35 years, and I want to welcome you to our website for fibromyalgia. I want to congratulate you on being here and watching these videos. And I want to tell you, when people come to our office, they want to know two basic things. One, they want to know how they got this way, and secondly, and more important, what can be done. I want to tell you, you're not going to get all the answers on this short video, but if you watch the full-length video that comes on next, you will get the information on those issues. You're going to find out also what can be done. So if you've been suffering with fibromyalgia or chronic pain and chronic fatigue, I know that you've been suffering, and I know that it has absolutely interfered with your life. Perhaps with relationships, with job, or just your enjoyment on day-to-day experiences. So there's a world of difference between how the medical establishment may have handled your condition, where they work predominantly with emergency care and with medication. Here, first thing we do is to find out why you are the way you are, why you are experiencing life the way you are, what has gone wrong, and more importantly, what can be done. Now, you're not going to hear this elsewhere. I know you may have already tried a lot, but after this video, I want you to hang in there and watch our full-length video to find out things that I know you have not heard before. All you have to do is ask yourself, is this the way I want to live the rest of my life? And I want to assure you that there are potential answers for you. If you look around the website, you'll see testimonials from people like you who have gotten relief. I'm Dr. Harry Schick. I look forward to seeing you soon. Hi, I'm Dr. Harry Schick. I want to welcome you from High Point Health Solutions. And today we're going to be discussing fibromyalgia and chronic pain syndrome. Now, fibromyalgia and chronic pain, like any other chronic problem, is really comes from two different areas. One, we're going to have some kind of a neurological imbalance in the body having to do with the nervous system, and the other is metabolic. So together, if somebody's got a chronic problem, if you have something that's been going on for a while, somehow there is an imbalance in these two systems, the neurological, the nervous system, and the metabolic, or the blood chemistry. And by the time we're done in a little while, you're going to understand this very well. So let's talk first about the neurological system. Let's talk about your nervous system. So your nervous system is made up basically of your brain, your spinal cord, and all the nerves that go out throughout your body. Now, if you have a metabolic problem, in other words, if you have something going on with your blood chemistry that's off, your nervous system is not going to work right. So the two systems, although I'm talking about them separately, are intricately involved together. But first, let's discuss the nervous system. So, as we said, it's made up of your brain, your spinal cord, and the nerves. Your brain is like the central computer, and it connects through the nerves throughout your whole body. Every single nerve in your body is dependent on nerve signals to keep it alive and healthy. So what that means, if you have a nerve which is not being stimulated, and we're going to discuss this, but if you have a nerve that's not being stimulated, it will slowly fatigue and fatigue and fatigue until it actually stops working any longer. So your brain stays alive from stimulation. Now let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of stimulation that exist. So we have receptors, for example, for gravity. Just getting up and walking around, even lying down to some degree, will stimulate your nervous system because gravity is putting pressure on your nerves all the time. And you're going to see something fantastic we have in the office in a little while, how we deal with that. Your joints, every time you move a joint, there's information that goes up to your brain. Everything you touch, both by touching something and also just having clothing on, stimulates touch receptors. Your eyes, by looking, anything you hear, you're listening now, you're watching me and listening, it's just stimulating your brain in a good way. If you smell things, stimulates other receptors. Tasting things, all different ways of stimulating your brain, and of course, thinking also does that. So I want to ask you a little question. Which two receptors do you think have the greatest effect on stimulating your brain? Touch and gravity. So the effect that gravity has on your body is tremendous amount of stimulation, which is why astronauts, when they go up into an or low gravity situation, unless there are precautions taken, can come back with problems. And also touch. And I emphasize this to my patients a lot because a lot of times they want to keep their brain alive and healthy. So they'll do crossword puzzles or play an instrument. And although those things are important, they're not nearly as powerful as just walking around and getting involved in different motion. So touch and gravity are the two most potent stimulators to the brain. Okay, so let's talk about the brain. We have three basic parts of the brain. Okay, starting on the bottom, we have the cerebellum. The cerebellum is at the base of the brain, down here. And then after that, we have the cerebrum, which is also known as the brain itself. And then also down at the bottom below the cerebellum, we have the brain stem. So these are the three basic categories: the brain stem at the bottom, the cerebellum, and the cerebrum up top. Now, how does the brain work? Well, the brain works by, we have sensory input. We were just talking about all the different types of stimulation. Sensory input goes into the body. So when I touch my hand, that information goes up to the cerebellum on the same side. If I grab something and touch something, my cerebellum on that same side of the body is being stimulated. And then that information is sent over and across to the opposite side of the brain. You may have heard about this, how signals cross over to the other side. So this is the basis of it. Stimulation comes in on one side and crosses over and stimulates the other. Now, when it goes to the other side, there are different lobes on the top of the brain that get stimulated. We have the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal and occipital lobes. These all make up the upper part of the brain. So again, stimulation goes lower and stimulates one of these lobes on the other side of the brain. And here we see, this is an example of the parietal lobe, which is the largest, and that's the one that's really involved with touch and sensation. Now the upper part of the brain connects back down to the brainstem. Remember, we talked about the brainstem earlier. And the brainstem is very interesting because a lot of the job of the brainstem is to inhibit or to keep things under control. Not all of the brain is involved with stimulation. Some of it is involved with inhibition, and that's critically important. For example, people who have movement disorders, the problem isn't so much that they get certain messages not to move too much, but they don't have enough messages to inhibit movement. And this is very common in Parkinson's, for example. So we have parts of the brain that stimulate and parts that are supposed to calm things down. And the brainstem on the bottom works on calming things down. And that totality together is what makes up the brain. Now, without having this braking system, your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight part, will constantly overfire and constantly stimulate, and that is where a lot of our chronic conditions, including fibromyalgia and including chronic fatigue, come from a lack of inhibition. In other words, it's like in a car, not having the proper brake pedal working on the car. So that's the basis as a very quick overview of the brain. Now, overfiring of the sympathetic nervous system. Now remember, too much firing in the brain can cause chronic pain and fatigue, irritable bowel syndrome, urinary tract infections, fibromyalgia, migraines, poor posture, and stress through adrenal gland stimulation. So, two things are important. We have to have stimulation of the brain, and if there are problems with that, we've got big problems. But we have to inhibit also so that there isn't overstimulation. It's a beautiful balance. When it works great, it's beautiful. When it doesn't work great, things like fibromyalgia come to being. Other things that happen in our overfiring can be issues of vision, too much sweating, sleeping issues, heart palpitations, cold hands and feet, and sensitivity to light and sound. Sensitivity to light and sound is one of the early signs that we see with people who have oversympathetic firing. Hard time driving at night, bright lights bother them, overly reactive to large sounds, things like this. So that has to do with one part of the brain. Now we're going to talk about the cerebellum, the first part that I spoke about, what's called cerebellum fatigue. If your cerebellum is overworked and not inhibited properly, you can have loss of balance, vertigo, chronic neck and back problems, headaches. You can have coordination issues where you may drop things. Also, you can have a problem with coordination of thought. where you have a hard time trying to remember what you're going to say. We call that disorganized thinking. And then also get a lack of output to the upper brain.
Yes.
So if the cerebellum is overly fatigued, we're not going to get enough information going to the upper brain. Here we see an area of the cerebellum, which is supposed to be firing to the upper brain, which then fires down to the brainstem. Now, we can have fatigue also of the upper brain. I know it's starting to sound complicated, and I'm not expecting you to be taking notes on this, but listen, folks, you got to understand the intricacies of how complicated it is, so that when we talk about all the work that we have to do, you'll see why. And I think you're beginning to understand why, if this isn't addressed, how are you going to get better? These are underlying issues of your condition, and if these conditions aren't addressed, things aren't just not going to change. So if there's fatigue in the upper brain, you're going to get, again, lack of inhibition of the sympathetic nervous system, and we're back to all of the issues that I mentioned before. In addition to that, there's more. A fatigue in the upper brain causes depression, anxiety, difficulty with reading, difficulty adding and subtracting, language problems, memory problems, learning issues. Unfortunately, these things are not segregated from the others. Many people can have coordination problems, chronic pain, difficulty sleeping, difficulty reading, and they all go together, and they're all coming, although they're coming from different parts of the brain, at the same time there is an interconnection. You can also get altered sensation from the upper brain, like a numbness or a tingling. Peripheral neuropathy is an example of this. Changes in handwriting. One of the first beautiful things we see when somebody starts to get better is that we'll see when they sign their name in, or they'll just tell us how their handwriting has changed. When somebody tells me their handwriting has changed for the better, I know we're making major impact on their brain. Anger, increased volatility, irritability, overall body weakness, lack of motivation. Now this is a huge, huge problem. A lot of times, and this may be you, people have fibromyalgia and lack of motivation. Now that's a big problem, because if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, this sounds pretty good, and you have a lack of motivation, what are you going to do about this? Unfortunately, you may not do anything. So you have to realize that your lack of motivation or desire to start something new is actually part of your problem. Hopefully somebody's watching this with you who will egg you on to have you do what you need to do to get better. But if you're just watching this alone, you have to realize this yourself. If you have a lack of motivation in general, it can keep you from getting better because you won't do the things you need to do. You won't take the steps that you need in order to get better. Also, we have that the lack of the fatigue in the upper brain. Again, this also results in a lack of inhibition of the sympathetic fight or flight system. It also inhibits a part of the midbrain called the mesencephalon. Okay, so let's talk about what happens now when we have a lack of firing up above, and that inhibition not only goes down below, but also affects the mesencephalon, which is the midbrain. Now, I like to think of the midbrain as your midbrain is like a hyperactive child, always wanting to do things, always firing too much, just too much energy. When that is not inhibited, when the brake pedal isn't put on that by the upper brain, it affects the spinal cord, it affects your adrenal glands, and then your adrenal glands emit a hormonal imbalance, and that hormonal imbalance gets released into your bloodstream, and that imbalance affects certain types of nerves called type C nociceptive pain fibers. They become stimulated, and what do you have? Chronic pain and fibromyalgia. And of course you wind up also likely with fatigue due to loss of sleep because you're too active all the time. Your brain can't slow down. So if you have a brain that you feel like can't slow down, believe it or not, this is involved in your chronic pain. So we have to deal with number one, stimulating the areas that need to be stimulated, but secondly, inhibit the areas that need to be inhibited. So it's on both counts. An overfiring mesencephalon affects what's called the mesencephalic activating system. Now, when that goes off, there is an imbalance that happens. When that reticular activating system goes off, a lot of times people will find that they overfire at 3 a.m. Is that you? And then they underfire at 3 p.m. So At 3 a.m. they have more energy than they have at 3 p.m. And of course this leads to and is part of chronic fatigue. What I'm showing here now is something very important. I'm showing you where it's coming from in the brain. Because once we know where it's coming from, we can do something about it. So if you have this imbalance where you're up at night and tired during the day, this can be helped. Now, this also adds into emotional stress, because you can see if you have this in kind of an imbalance going on, you're fatigued. I don't have to tell you this. Any of these imbalances will lead to an emotional stress. Why? You can't live the life that you want to live. You can't feel the way you want. You may have a lack of willpower, too much anger, depression, anxiety. You're feeling this emotionally, but it has a chemical and a neurological component to it, and that's how we work with it. And the ultimate factor going through the pituitary, the adrenals, problem focusing, you wind up with fibrofog. You may have been told you have it, you may feel it, or you may be hearing this term for the first time. But fibrofog is a real thing. And I know, sadly, too many people wind up going to a specialist or somebody help them and they say, fibrofog, well, you just need some antidepressants. No, that's not what you need. We need to get this fixed. Also, having an overfiring mesencephalon causes blood vessels in the brain to dilate. That creates pressure on the nerves, and that's where you get migraines. So can you see that from this seed of an imbalance, all these different things come out? So and I just gave you a few. So how does this happen? Stress. Chemical stress, physical stress, and emotional stress. These all cause the brain to fatigue. And when the brain fatigues, you get fewer impulses, both in stimulating in the right way, and you get fewer impulses to help inhibit what should be inhibited. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the stresses that I just mentioned. They're all over the place. You could have anemia, which people think of as an iron issue. Well, we don't really care about the iron so much as the fact that the iron carries oxygen. If you have decreased oxygen going on in your body, it's a major problem. I have so many patients coming in saying, oh yeah, I have a little anemia. Or write it off as just nothing. I say, well, do you take anything? Well, sometimes. Anemia is a huge deal. Because if you're anemic, you're not getting oxygen to the brain. Not oxygen to the brain, we run into that whole cycle. A blood sugar imbalance, crucial, because your nervous system needs oxygen and it needs the proper amount of sugar, not too little, not too much, in order to fire right. You can have food sensitivities. Common ones we see are gluten, dairy, and soy. You can have immune system imbalance. An autoimmune problem will always create some level of fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue. A thyroid problem, poor diet, and on and on. All these assaults to your chemical system. These are metabolic problems that create nervous system problems. Why? Because your chemical system and your nervous system, as I think you're beginning to see now, are intertwined. So we can't just work with your nervous system, and we can't just work metabolically with you. There's no pill that's going to help your nervous system. We need to do things, which we're going to talk about. And then we have emotional stress. Emotional stress creates problems with your adrenal glands, which affects your cortisol, affects your insulin, affects your brain. It can make your blood sugar too high. Also, we see changes in triglycerides and cholesterol. All of this goes together. It's beautiful, but it's also immense to look at and to find what we need to do to get you fixed. High insulin glucose levels cause a breakdown of your brain and nerves. So we have to address it from that perspective also. Now, this I think you already know. Chronic conditions do not get better by themselves, and I think you see now why. Listen, if somebody comes into me and they say, look, I've had this problem forever, I've had it for 10 years, 5 years, whatever, I already know it's complex. Why? Because your body is unbelievably good at fixing things. If you've got something going on for a while, it's because it's so complex that your body needs help. Let's look at fibromyalgia specifically. We see that the longer an individual has had fibromyalgia, the greater the gray matter loss in the brain. It's frightening. With each year of fibromyalgia being equivalent to 9.5 times the loss in normal aging. So fibromyalgia, besides causing problems, increases your speed of aging. Now, which comes first? Now that you understand, you may understand more than this quote even, because now you understand that the brain problem creates fibromyalgia, and the fibromyalgia creates more of a brain problem. What are we going to do? We have to do something, and we have to do it quickly. So we use a couple things in the office. So now I painted the picture. I want to explain a little bit about brain-based therapy. In order for brain-based therapy to work, it only works because of something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is what's going to save you, saves all of us. That means that your brain is alive and it can rewire itself. Okay? And because it can do that, it is able to rejuvenate and we can help. A brain which is older than 3 years old is not the rigid structure that it was. We see that the brain is plastic. You know, it's a strange word. I used to hear neuroplasticity, I thought of plastic being hard, but in this context it really means that it can be changed when stimulated. But you have to know how to stimulate it. Sitting at home and doing crossword puzzles is not going to do it. There are different types of stimulation. Remember we talked a while ago about the receptors. So there's different types of stimulation that help different areas of your brain. Now, let's start to tie things together. The cerebellum and the brain require two things to function properly. Fuel meaning the right amount of sugar, and oxygen, and activation. Brain exercises and other kinds of activation we're going to talk about. That's how you get your brain going, and that's how you rid yourself of fibromyalgia. So, we use a couple of very unique and very wonderful therapies. I'm going to just talk to you about a few. We do something called pulsed electromagnetic frequencies. All right, so I want to explain this to you because it's unbelievable and mind-boggling. You know, you're made up of cells. If you have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or chronic pain, the cells of your body are not doing so well. Because if your cells were doing well, you'd be feeling well. So if we look at the basic cell of the body, and you have trillions of cells, and somebody with a chronic problem, we know three things about their cells. Number one, we know that the voltage inside the cell has dropped. So that means if you can measure the electric charge, and you can, of a cell, instead of being here, it drops down. Now, when the charge of a cell goes down, oxygen leaves the cell, so the cell becomes deoxygenated. And when the oxygen leaves the cell, at the same time, the pH of your body changes to being acidic. So the cell becomes low voltage, acidic, and underoxygenated. Now what we want to do is to change that. And I know some people try eating alkaline diet and so forth. That may help some if it's done right. But really, this is what really works. Now, if I could raise the voltage in your cell, what would happen is that your oxygen would come back and your cell would switch from acid to alkaline. Now I can't do that with electricity because to put that much electricity in your body to raise your cell would burn your skin on the way in. But we use electromagnetic frequencies. This is an electromagnetic machine. It sends magnetic energy into the body. The magnetic charges hit the cell membrane changes it to electrical. It raises the voltage in your body. It brings oxygen into the cell and makes your cell alkaline. It's unbelievably beautiful. We've been using this for a few years and the results are phenomenal. Another thing I want to tell you about is our anti-gravity treadmill. A lot of times people have a hard time with walking. Right? So people say they have chronic fatigue, they can't walk, or they have fibromyalgia, they can't do the walking they need to do. And one of the reasons they can't walk is because your joints at this point cannot sustain your body weight. So we have an anti-gravity treadmill where you step inside this machine, as this woman has. You're surrounded by a depressurized chamber, and when you walk, instead of weighing 200 pounds or weighing 150 pounds, your body only experiences 30 or 40 pounds of weight. So imagine that. Imagine you being 30 pounds and going for a walk. It would be much easier, right? Okay. So we use in part of our therapy the anti-gravity treadmill. And there's many other things that we do too. We have different ways of utilizing oxygen. We do vibration. We do stimulation. We do metronome. We use different types of auditory stimulation, smelling with olfactory stimulation, color lenses, all kinds of things. But Which do we do? I don't know. It depends on you. This is not like a brain gym where you come in and we do a little bit of everything. The important thing is we analyze initially where your issues are. Now, so we look at things neurologically, and now we also have to know where your metabolic issues are. Are you anemic? Do you have food sensitivities? Is your thyroid an issue? Hypothyroid, very common with fibromyalgia. Do you have hidden infections and so forth? How do you know if you have any of these? Right? You have to test. So if you're not tested, you're not going to know. And if we don't know, then we can't help. Now, a lot of times people come in, we're just going to just use a simple example with blood testing. And they've been told, hey, I'll ask them, hey, have you had your blood work done? He goes, yeah, but everything is normal. I was told everything is normal. Well, I always want to see the blood work myself. And the reason for that is that I want to talk about, on blood work, the difference between functionally normal and average. So when you go to a lab and you get your blood work done, assuming you even get blood work comprehensive enough, when you get your blood work done, they're going to come back and tell you if something is in a normal range or not. But that really is a misnomer. It's not normal. It's an average range, because that range is found by measuring everybody who had blood work in the lab for the last 2 or 3 years. So let me ask you a question. Who goes to a lab to get blood work done? The healthiest people in society? Maybe once in a while, but generally, if you go to a lab and look around the waiting room, people on medication, people sick, people not feeling well, that's who you're being compared to. So when they tell you that your blood work is in a normal range, that means you're doing as well as these guys. And I hate to tell you, that's not going to be good enough. That's why you can have normal blood work and still feel sick. So we look at functional lab ranges. You could be okay here, but in the area where you need to be, it's not good enough. Okay, so if you were told that your tests are normal, let's see what that really means with a specific example. A traditional high-low range for glucose, for your blood sugar, is 65 to 110. So you may be told that your blood sugar rather falls in that range, so you're normal, everything is fine. The problem is 65 to 110 is not good. You really need to be between 85 and 100. Because if you're at 73, you're actually hypoglycemic. If you're over 100, you're hyperglycemic, not good enough. So your neighbors are in this range, but you need to be in this range. Same thing with TSH, cholesterol, all these things where not only do we have to make sure we're doing all the right tests, but we have to analyze it properly, or else you're going to be told you're normal, and you're going to think you're crazy because you don't feel normal. So based on your history, and of course, first thing we have to do is talk to you, we're going to look carefully at what tests we need to do. Certain kinds of blood work, extensive blood work. We have to do saliva testing for hormones. Also, we do saliva testing now for genetic testing. We may do hair analysis. We may do stool tests. We do certain kinds of food allergy testing. Are you getting the idea? Listen, you take your car to a mechanic. He does a comprehensive examination on your car. I think you deserve at least that. How many of these tests have you actually had done? How is anybody going to help you if you haven't had the testing done? So what we find are neurological breakdown with metabolic components. And once we start putting everything together, you start feeling more together. We get your cortisol, your blood sugar, oxygen, all of this together, until finally, as a whole person, your metabolic side can work, and it'll work in concert with the neurological side that we've already discussed. It's a big task. We have to do this. We have to meet you. We have to do the testing, and then we have to apply the proper therapies. So what's next for you? So I want to explain to you now. Hopefully you've gotten a lot of information you didn't have, and you can watch it again if you need to. Let's talk about what happens in this office. I want to tell you what happens on the first 2 visits here. On the first visit, you're going to get a complete neurological evaluation. How's your brainstem? How's the mesencephalon? How are the lobes doing of your brain? Right? How are your senses? How are your receptors for touch, taste, smell? Depending on your history, we're going to check everything neurologically that we have to. And then most people have labs, chances are if you have a chronic problem, you've had blood work done. We're going to review those labs and see how they were analyzed and see what else you might need. I'm going to have you fill out a metabolic assessment form. It's another way for me to get information from you. And I ask that you please have your spouse or significant other with you when you come, because I'm going to give you a lot of information even on this first visit. And you're going to go home, and somebody's going to say to you, well, what happened? You're going to go, there's so much you're not going to be able to explain to them. Much better if they're there. Now what happens in visit 2? First of all, we're going to see, based on the information I have, do I accept your case or not? So if I do accept your case, we're going to talk about an overview of what further testing needs to be done. The first visit opens the door, and then I see what rooms we need to go into to find out more about you. We're going to review the neurological findings, and then I'm going to give you an overview of the treatment plan based on all the information we have at that point. And also at that time we're going to talk about finances, because I know that's something which is important to people who come here. And again, I ask that your spouse come. If you couldn't explain the first visit, imagine trying to explain all the findings to them, just the neurological findings alone. You're not going to be able to tell them. You're going to go home, again, they're going to say, well, what happened? Well, he touches, you know what, I really don't know what happened, because it's a lot. Plus, it would be helpful if they're with you, so you can review with them. So, I only accept 5 new fibromyalgia patients per month, because I have a busy office, and I love working with fibromyalgia. It's very rewarding, but I like doing other things too. So we take 5 new patients a month. First 2 visits are normally $450. So after watching this video, when you call and you tell them that you saw this video, the first 2 visits will be $75. Now, if you come in for your second visit and I feel like you're not a candidate for my office, I give you back your $75. I'm only accepting that on the contingency that I feel like I can help you. Now that's on my end. Now I have 3 rules for accepting your case. On your end, you ready for this? Because if I feel like I can help you and you're not doing this, have a nice day, but we're not working together. You must be willing to make serious life changes. The way you're living your life now has gotten you to where you are. If you're not going to make serious life changes, you're not getting better, you're not going to be happy, I'm not going to be happy, it's not going to work. So I need you on board with this. You have to take accountability for your health. That kind of goes together. In other words, this is your health. The stuff that you're doing, the things that you're doing, the decisions that you are making is what got you to where you are. I'm going to guide you. I'm going to be with you step by step. But you have to make the changes. And third, I want you to know that insurance and Medicare may pay for a small portion, maybe a little, but more than small, I don't know. But for the majority of people who come in, they can get all the care that they need for as little as $200 to $400 a month. So that's what you're looking at from that perspective. But back to you now. I want to ask you this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how serious are you? If you've watched this all the way to this point, either you find me tremendously entertaining, or you're just interested in information, or you're serious. Hopefully, you're serious about this. But ask yourself, how has it affected your relationships? I know from the many, many people with fibromyalgia that I've worked with and chronic fatigue, I know that it can be devastating to relationships. Many people aren't even working anymore. How about your ability to enjoy life? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how serious are you with eliminating your illness? I may be at a 10. I really want to help you. But if you're only at a 3 or a 4, we're not going to work together. Right? You have to be at least as excited as I am. Really should be more excited than I am. So due to my time constraints, as I told you, you have to be willing to make the changes. You have to be into this. You have to want this. So I want to thank you. That's the fibromyalgia and chronic pain story. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can look at other places on the website and call, or you can just call and make the appointment. You'll have our phone number on the website. When you call, tell them that you saw the video and that you want to have the 2 visits for the $75. Call soon. Again, I want to remind you of one last thing. Decreased motivation is a part of the problem for most people who have this. So you may actually have to go outside of yourself to do this. You may have to actually push yourself, overcome your doubts, overcome the thoughts of nothing has helped before, how can this help? You have to overcome that and take a chance on the 2 visits. Again, if I don't feel like I can help you, you're going to get your money back. I'm Dr. Harry Schick. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to meeting you soon.